Alrighty, so you want to make an IKFK switch. Well, all right. So basically, you're gonna take your joints. Let's make it so I cannot select my mesh anymore. Very good. And we want to have this hand moving in IK, and then have a channel that can switch to FK. We're gonna do that with multiple controls in here that are going to be guiding this. And let's just go ahead and start making some of these IK controls. So you can see that I have my FK chain right here. That's going to be my control hierarchy, right? That's where all of my controls sit. They're not named correctly. I really recommend renaming them nicely, but I didn't for this demo. And you're going to take this control hierarchy, and you're essentially going to use some joints from this hierarchy. We're going to duplicate this arm out. We're going to not need all those hand joints. We're not going to need those. And we'll have a set of 3 of them. So essentially, we're going to press duplicate, and you'll see that we end up with 3 arms, right? Now, the idea behind this is that you have one FK arm that just rotates, and then you have an IK arm that is determined by the IK position of that end joint, and then they're both binding this resulting arm. This resulting arm then constrains back into this joint hierarchy the real joint system that you would export to the game engine or whatever. So let me take this. I'm going to delete those, and I'm going to duplicate this this joint. You can see that I just used the quick rig to create the joint hierarchy for this, and then I added some finger joints. But yeah, so I'm just going to select this top shoulder joint, and I'm going to duplicate it. Boom. There we go. Now you'll see that I have an entire other arm in there, and I don't need any of these bonus finger joints, right, on this duplicated hierarchy. We don't need that. I'm just going to select all those and delete it, right? So now, let me just select that. This is that duplicated arm, right? And I'm going to middle click drag this, or actually I'm just going to make it a child of this shoulder right here, right? I'm just going to make it a child of that. So let's drag that in. This is where naming would have been helpful, indeed, you know. But actually, let's make it a child of this clavicle instead, because we're going to be doing some stuff with this. Let's take that. I'm just going to middle click drag it to that shoulder right there. So now we have this shoulder, or this arm joint. Notice that this one doesn't have fingers because we deleted them, but it matches up exactly with the other one. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to rename this shoulder FK arm. I'm going to name this, also you should probably do just at home if you're doing this, like denote somehow that this is the left arm, you know. Let's do _L. I'm looking for elbow FK arm. And then this is going to be the wrist FK arm L. And you can use whatever system you want to denote left and right. You can be _L, it can be _left, you can have left _shoulder, you know, whatever naming convention you want there. So that's the FK, right? Now I'm going to duplicate that, boom, right there. This is going to be the IK. So I'm just going to take this IK. There we go. Delete all those weird characters. There we go. There we go. All right, so this is going to be the IK. And then, boom, I'm going to name this result arm. Result arm. There we go. So this IK arm is going to be driven by some controls in here. And then this FK arm is also going to be driven by some controls in here. It's going to be driven by these ones, in fact, all these bad boys. These can be moving around, driving it. And then they're both going to bind to this result arm. It's going to be fantastic. And note that this is in our control hierarchy, right? Like if I just want to rename this group for clarity, control hierarchy. You know, and yours would normally start at the waist. I didn't go bother about creating the entire, system for all that. It just rotates by itself, and it's using these groups to store all that transform information. Let me also let me freeze my stuff now that I'm mentioning it. Let me just make sure all of my controls are frozen, because as an animator, when they hop in and they start messing around with your rig, they want these values to be zeroed out in the channel box. That way, if they really mess around with that character, deform it a bunch, then oh, I accidentally lost my my transform there with that freezing process. I'd have to unparent this first and then freeze it. The classic. But yeah, the problem is that they want to be able to just zero out those values nice and easy. If you make it so they this zero value is not in like the bind pose, then that's going to be a problem for the animators when they're going through there. All right, so next up, I'm going to take this control, and let's just name this elbow FK, right? Control. And let's name this wrist FK control. Let's name this shoulder control. Shoulder FK control. And then this will be clav FK control. There we go. Okay, so those are all looking nice. And we can just easily rename this to that. Boom, just double click this, reassign that name, boom. And yeah, I was gonna do this without renaming them, but then I realized it'd just be too confusing with it, so so there we go. It's looking good. It's looking good. All right, so let's go in and let's try rotating some of these. Yeah, very nice, very nice, very cool, very cool. Okay, so let's go create our IKs, our IK controls. You essentially just need an elbow and a wrist IK control. So I'm just gonna steal this shoulder essentially. I'm gonna delete, or I'm gonna Control D to duplicate that. And this is gonna be interesting. Actually, let's undo that. Let's duplicate the group instead. You always want to duplicate the group. And we're going to reparent that elbow control. And I'm just going to put that under the clav control, right? And then I'm going to delete that bonus, that extra little shoulder FK control that we made from that duplication process. And this is going to be the IK control group. It's going to be the IK control. It's going to be the wrist IK control. Wrist IK control. There we go. And so for this, you're going to want to go into control vertex mode and somehow change the appearance of it. Oh, let me make it so I can't select joints for now, just so it's going to be easier to select this. Let's make it like this sort of shape. That way we can really tell when we're in IK mode. Maybe something a little bit sharper like that. Sure, looks great. And then remember that's the IK control, wrist IK. Now let's take the elbow IK control, and we're actually going to be moving this kind of dramatically far away. So I'm going to unparent with Shift P that wrist control group. I'm I'm going to take this last node and just slide it out here. It's important that you're sliding. Make sure you hold W and left click and go into object mode because you're going to slide it straight back from that elbow. This is going to be something called a pole vector. And a pole vector basically looks at your transform and it will aim an IK handle towards that transform, which is very important for this process. Let's just size this up. It's very important for this process that we can do that because, you know, that's pretty much one of the main features of IKs that they're going to point at. They're going to point at this pole vector. So I'm making it an arrow shape, denoting that the elbow is going to be pointing that way, you know? And if you're having trouble modifying those curve shapes, just remember you can always right click and then go into control vertex mode and start messing around with those control verts. All right, so I'm going to save before I ruin everything. I always save scene as, so I'm going to do demo 2. Very good, very good. And so now we have our FK arms right there, our shoulder IK arms, and then the result arm, right? So now in the IK, we need to start creating that IK setup, right? We need to create that IK setup. And I'm going to make these joints just a little bit bigger so I can click on them in the viewport. It's going to make it a little bit easier to make that IK chain for those ones. We can always resize them with this radius channel. Don't forget to freeze out your little pole vector here. And we might want to just also call this the pole vector. So pole vector. And a pole vector essentially tells your IK chain where to point. So when you move it this way, it's going to follow that. Also for our IK, and just all of our joints in general, you're going to want to make sure that they're oriented nicely. And also just make sure you freeze those transforms on them. You want to freeze, modify, freeze. Let's do rotation, and then click apply. And the reason we do that is because we want these rotation channels to be zeroed out, and when you freeze them, it goes instead to the joint orient. And we should probably do that for all of our joints down here as well, just to be safe. Modify, freeze transforms, rotate. There we go. And now, because if you don't have this joint orient holding that information, then likely when you add this IK handle, it's just going to bug out and not behave properly. So let's go in and do create IK handle. I'm going to click on you click on the starting node and then the end node of the IK handle. And then now you have that IK arm in there, right? So that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. And now since we have this in a different hierarchy, let's get this back in the IK control. Yeah, let's get this back in the hierarchy for the character. I'm going to make this a child of that clav FK control. Make this a child as well of that clav FK. So whenever we move this around, it'll move all those with it. You might want to have an option to switch it in space because a lot of times animators like to have their arm be oriented the proper way. So you can just add an orient constraint to this whole chain right there. But yeah, so you can see how these are our result joints, and these are our 3 arms. One of them already has the IK on there. And then we're just going to be driving those, right? So let's start to get our constraints going, right? Now in Maya, for these constraints, it's going to be driver and then driven. That's going to be your selection order. So if you want this cube to move along with this cube, you're going to select driver and then driven, and then you're going to constrain. You can do parent, and it's just going to offset it with all that sort of stuff in there. When you move it around, it's going to do the same thing. It's just going to move one to one. Remember, this constrained thing cannot move by itself after that. You need to have it, you need to either reduce the weight of that constraint to start moving it, or you know, something else. You know, it's just, all of its transform attributes will be overridden by other stuff. So there's also constraint point, and that's just going to kind of make it move right on top of the other one. Undo point constraint. You can do constrain pull vector is what we're going to be using for that IK arm elbow right there. You can also do orient constraint. So whenever you rotate that, it's going to keep that same orientation. So yeah, lots of great stuff there. Let's see. Let's go back to the constraint menu. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, let's go with let's get these out of here. Sorry, I was just demonstrating those. And then let's select our driver for the pull vector, and then our IK handle. So I just control clicked that, and I'm going to do constraint pull vector. So now whenever I move that pull vector control, you see that? See how it's bending that IK handle. So if I move this even tighter, you can see how it's bending that elbow, right? Very cool. So next up is we have to get our FK working. So this has to start pushing around that FK arm. So I'm just gonna do a parent constraint on this. I'm not too concerned. So I'm gonna do driver, and then control click driven, constrain parent. Boom. You'll see that that constraint node pops up in there. If you look at the attribute editor, you can see like a lot of offset stuff in there. You can control those values and update it if you'd like. I don't recommend doing that for this because they're just already sitting on top of each other. Like the orients are already all there. So elbow FK, that's gonna be the driver. Oh, sorry, no, it's not. That's gonna be the driven. So let's do the elbow FK control. It's gonna be driving the elbow FK arm, and then constrain parent. Then wrist FK control is gonna be controlling the wrist FK arm, constrain parent. There we go. So now you'll see this is rotating, and these are all driving that FK arm inside of our control hierarchy. Remember, these are all in the control hierarchy. The only ones that we don't have in there are just these default quick rig joints in there. But yeah, so let's go back to our control hierarchy. Very cool, very cool. And then now we're looking at our IK setup, and we have to get these both sort of controlling the result wrist, right? So first, let's get the FK to control it. Let's do. First, I'm going to save, just by the way. 16 as. Always do iterative saves. You can also do increment and save if you prefer. That's fine by me. But yeah, so let's get this driving that. So wrist FK needs to be driving wrist result, right? So I'm going to do driver and then driven, and let's do an orient. Let's do a point and orient constraint on that, right? So point just makes it so when I move FK, it's going to also move that result arm, right? And then I'm going to do the same, but with an orient. And do, oh, sorry, not orient joint, constraint orient. There we go. So now this result has those two constraints on there. For every constraint, you can always look in the channel box, and you can control the weight of those constraints on there. So that's fantastic. And we're going to do the same for the elbow. Elbow FK. We can sort of split it out, or we split out the point and the orient for that, but let's just do a simple parent. Let's do constrain parent. Let's do shoulder, constrain parent. So now when this is moving that shoulder FK, it's moving that result as well. So let's undo that. And we were very bad. We left the -90 in the rotate. We should really not do that, but I'm just going to push on ahead with this video. But yeah, so now we should also get the IK pushing this stuff around, right? So let's take that wrist IK, let's take that wrist result, and let's do constrain. And something that's interesting about this is that you usually want to have the orient of that IK just sit in world space, right? So let's get this, or we want it sitting we want it orienting in world space. So let's take that wrist IK control, and we need to have that be moving that IK handle, right? So let's do driver driven. I'm just going to do constrain parent. So now it's moving that IK around in there. And then let's also get it to select that. Let's select wrist IK, do constrain orient. So now that wrist is no longer bending. Like it's no longer rotating in there. And that's perfect for us. And then we also need, since we already did that pull vector, we need to now get it to start driving that result arm, right? So let's look at that elbow IK, wrist IK. This needs to be driving that wrist result. And we can do point and orient constraints on that. That's going to be fine. But just know that like whenever you have this result on there, oh, sorry, I got the wrong one. Let's do driver, then driven, constrain, point. There we go. Yeah, nice. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong nodes there. As you do these constraints, you can have them, you see how they're adding the node that's controlling it in this channel box. If you go to this, under this shapes menu right here, wrist IK, wrist FK, and it says, left weight 0, weight 1. So if this is at a weight of 1, sorry, let me set up the other. Let's do, sorry, we're looking for IK result, and then let's do constrain. We already had that. Let's do an orient. There we go. So when I move around that arm, that IK, see how this result chain is now halfway following that IK, and it's halfway following that FK. It's a very important concept, and you can control how far it's going, or how much it's going to go between those with these values, right? So if I type in 0 on the FK, boom, see how it's completely following the IK right there, 1 to 1. And then if I 0 out IK, it's just going to snap back into world space. FK, let's do that. Now let's bend this right there. All right, so let's click back on that wrist result. If you just make it point and then 0 that out, press 1 in there, see how it's it's following that, and then it's that node is being constrained with all these point constraints right here. That's what's holding it right there, you know. So yeah, that's going to be very important for us. And let's do the same thing with the elbow, right? So I'm going to click the IK elbow. I'm going to control click the elbow result, and we used a parent constraint here, so I'm going to use a parent constraint as well. I just wanted to show you guys the. Oh, sorry. Let's get these back into their default positions. I believe this one was -90. Even though it's definitely not correct. And then let's do this. Let's zero that out. Very cool. We have -90 on that rotation too. Very cool. Very cool. Very smart. No, don't do that. Make sure you froze those before you bounded them to your hierarchy in there. But yeah, so then let's take our elbow IK, and then bind that to the elbow result. Let's do constrain parent, and then let's do elbow shoulder. Now, shoulder doesn't need to be exactly moved like that. It's already functioning pretty nice. But yeah, you can see those 3 arms in there, right? So we have the FK up here, IK still down there, and then the result is in the middle. So yeah, it's pretty nice. Some pretty cool tech there, you know. But yeah, so there's that. And then we need to have this wrist result. Like the last step is having this wrist result arm controlling our hierarchy, right? Because this is all still in the control hierarchy. We need that to be constraining this joint hierarchy, right? Because this joint hierarchy is all that we care about, right? That's all we care about. All the other work that we've been doing is just putting stuff inside that control hierarchy right there. You can see it moving around there. But yeah, so now we need that driving the joint hierarchy. So let's do driver, boom, wrist result arm, and then driven. I'm going to control click that final wrist, because you'll notice that this final wrist is the one that has all those hands on there. And I'm going to do constrain. Let's just do a parent, you know. And I'm going to do elbow result, and control click the left arm. Wait, no. Left forearm. Let's just do that again. I'm going to click driver, and then control click forearm. There we go. Perfect. Constrain parent. Let's do shoulder result arm. Control click left shoulder. Oh, sorry. Left arm. They don't have the same naming convention in that quick rig. Constrain parent. There we go. So now when we start rotating this stuff around, see that result arm is just completely constraining the position of that joint hierarchy. And so now when we are moving these values around on these transforms, they're moving that resulting joint hierarchy. You can rotate these bad boys any which way you please. But yeah, so that's the first step of the IKFK switch. And that's all that I want you to do for now. I'll have another video on setting up the attributes and swapping between those channels. All right, thanks for watching.